Hello everyone and welcome back to Realism Overhaul Sandbox and Kerbal Space Program 1.12. I've been working on the ASCA spaceplane. A very subtle change this time, but one that does need to be tested. And that is that it used to use stock decouplers to decouple off its boosters. The ASCA spaceplane does have boosters. It's not the Scram Spike, so it's not an SSTO. And it had these, well, it had these 3-segment RSRMs, and then I also had the Bola type boosters. And I have made custom decouplers, and we need to make sure that they work. I've done some testing and there have been problems, but I think I have them fixed finally after a few tries. One of the problems was that I think ascent guidance was actually throttling down the engines when it wasn't supposed to. I wasn't trying to use ascent guidance, but sometimes ascent guidance tries to do things when it's not supposed to, even though I'm using KOS. But I've disabled that now. And there were other subtle things like the decouplers have to be tilted in just the right way to meet the body. And yeah, that got complicated. Either you tilt them the right way or you change the node direction. Anyway, so putting them on is complicated. They stay on, by the way. I don't know if people think that that's a good idea or not, but I feel like they should probably just stay on. Now, there's a reason for that I'm going to broach later on, but for now, it's just that I think they are going to be an integral part of the plane. It does make airflow bad here, though. So, I'm of two minds about it, of course. Maybe we should just have them go off with the boosters, or we should have them fixed to the body and have the boosters separate from here and leave these on. Now, as far as why I want the custom decouplers, well, of course, it's better than using the stock ones anyway, as long as they work, but also they are at a particular location. So if we take a look at the internals of the ASCA spaceplane, that's what this is. I did model them because I've done this to ridiculous detail. I haven't done the stringers all yet, but anyway, we do have the ribs here, and we can see that the decoupler sits on top of 2 ribs in particular, that one and that one. And they're fairly important. The forward one is actually the one that's bracing the methane tank. That's the red tank there. And also they're among the ones that attach to the wings. So the main wing box is basically these 2 ribs. So given that we have a strong point here, or it's intended to be a strong point, and so it works with the rest of the structure of the plane if we have the decoupler just like that. So anyway, we have that there, but we have to launch it with the boosters to see whether the boosters actually decouple properly. The stock decouplers sometimes make it easy. The issues are, well, this has a collider on it, right? We don't want it colliding. Another issue is that it has to be tilted the right way so that the boosters aren't clipping into the body at all. Let me try and show that. As you can see, it's a close fit, and if the decoupler is tilted in the wrong way, when we separate off the boosters, they are going to clip and blow up. So yes, I've had that already happen. So there's that. There's how the skirt fits on it, so it doesn't clip into the vertical stabilizer, that it all separates properly. So we are going to go out to the launch pad with it all set up and see how it goes. Okay, here we are at Tampico, and I will be using KOS. There is more to these decouplers than just these boosters. We'll get to that. But launching is always the fun part. Alright, getting ready for booster set. Well, in a little bit. Let's see. Okay, they look clean to me, though I really need some effects on the separatrons that are built into the boosters. Well, now we get to see whether it makes orbit properly. I do have deferred rendering in here now. I'm not super sure what it does. It's a lot of trouble and still don't know if it's made much of a difference from me not having it in here. Okay, we have mode change on the engines. They're no longer triprop, they're just hydrogen and oxygen. Now, we use the least fortunate booster configuration, the 3-segment RSRMs. The bullet boosters do better and can allow it to carry more payload capacity. It does have some payload. You can always tell when I've got payload because I've got the avgas, right? The avgas is always payload. That's why I use avgas, because it shows up, unlike the lead. Some people use lead, but I prefer it to show up, and I prefer it to be obviously a thing that we're not going to use otherwise. So you can always tell whether I've got the payload or not. In this case, I believe it's 6 tons. Alright, we are in orbit with 215 meters per second left, so that part's fine. But let's talk about some of the other things that we are going to do with these decouplers. Well, they're not going to be acting like decouplers, but they'll be acting like supports for something else. Previously for the Scram Spike, I had very custom shaped jet engines, and they were sort of like this. But really, they were very stylized and meant to fit in a neat way, but they're not practical. There's not much of an intake area, and as far as their mass was concerned, they were rather light for the kind of thrust that they provided. And also, some I pointed out, Skylon had its engines on the outboard at the wingtips, possibly because they didn't want it to heat up the very cold fuels in the body. So that all seemed very reasonable to me. And so now with the decouplers, we're not going to use them to decouple these, but I decided to just go ahead and borrow Skylon's engines. These are a little bit different. They're not as powerful as the Skylon engines, if I can get it on there. Okay. They're smaller. They're actually 90% in width. And a little bit longer just to sort of fit the body a little bit better. But they have less thrust overall. They match the stats of these engines, so they're not full Skylon engines, and that does fine for us. So now they're at least sort of separate from the body, and they have a bit more intake area and can probably do a more credible job of it. And of course they fit the same decouplers as, or fit the same mounts, I should say, as the boosters did. And so everything sort of goes along with the boosters. So why would we have jet engines on this? Well, if it needed to be ferried, we would just sort of slap them on, basically. So as long as the mounts were still there, we would hook up the jet engines. Hopefully there'll be a way to hook them up. And then it's sort of like a Baran arrangement with the jet engines like that, as you know, as opposed to the fixed engines. So it does its booster thing. It comes back down, lands, and they have some of these engines ready to go to slap on there so that it can go just make a normal flight. So it can ferry itself around, and that's just an option. But it's not really what I meant for these to do. What I meant with these was to have it be an option for the supersonic air launch carrier vehicle. So not only would the same engines be used on here, but they would be used on the supersonic air launch vehicle, and also potentially on the Orion carrier plane. So let's take a look at that. Previously I had contemplated using the Sabre engine from Skylon on here, but it did sort of get in the way of things. So now we have a regular hydrogen one, and we also have a methane one. Okay, I feel like that's probably a better arrangement, though it's still probably overkill, really. And it's just a matter of whether we want to be able to ferry the Orion carrier from place to place. I've done some interesting things getting it from place to place before. I made a special version of Stratolaunch and also double-bodied A380 to carry it. But we could do this, and this also ensures that it could land at the Bahama landing site that it's supposed to land at. But these are heavy and they could get in the way of it delivering a good payload to orbit. Of course, it doesn't go to orbit, but doing its first stage duty, trying to get a good payload to orbit. So that's a bit of an obstacle, and we're going to have to test that separately. So that testing will come up, and we'll see whether having jet engines on it is a good thing or a bad thing. And yeah. So with that as a teaser for what's coming up, I'll say thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.